Hi, I'm Devash. I'm the founder of Bombay Founders Club.
And I'm Avik Ashad.
I'm a founder.
And I'm a funder.
And welcome to another episode of The Founder and the Funder.
So, Devash, what are we talking about today?
There's this question which has been on my mind for a while. Who's actually responsible for layoffs? Founders or funders?
The world and founders and funders, both. I think it's a bit of a shared responsibility across the board.
Yeah. I think there were, over 400,000 layoffs globally over the last few years. Over 35,000 layoffs in India from startups. How did we get here?
This one's going to need a little bit of unpacking. And they're going to be slightly complex points, but I'm going to try and break it down and make it as digestible as possible. So, the global financial market is one of the most shaky and crazy things that exists. And you have people controlling hundreds of billions of dollars as single entities managing investments. Now, for most of you to think about it, this aren't like secret oligopolies of like cabals and billionaires. This is, think of pension funds. Good examples would be the Ontario Teachers Pension Fund or Life Insurance Corporation of India or various pension funds around the world or endowment funds around the world. These are funds that are holding like capital in trust for generations. Like if you need to make sure that you're taking care of the pensions of people who retire, and you have to make sure that from 60 to 90 probably they're going to get a certain amount of money every month, and that money gets adjusted for inflation. So every year, that money, the payout has to increase by a few percent. You really have to think about how to safeguard that capital. So that's how that big capital pool comes. Now, where most of this money goes, the first place it actually flows to is the safest investment in the world, which is the US government bond, the sovereign bond. This is basically investing in the US, getting a coupon return, and saying that this is backed by the government of the USA. So that's where most money used to flow, and then it flows from there to public equities, to private equities, to various other investments. Now, what happened in the last, I'd say about 6 years, even pre-COVID, was the US government bonds went down to zero interest rates. So that means that if you buy into a bond, you're getting nothing. You're effectively investing, and you're going to get the same amount back years later. So that made all other forms of investments way more attractive. So when you're looking at it, you're saying, hey, okay, I'm going to invest I used to invest 2% in private equity and venture capital. Suddenly I'll invest 5% in private equity and venture capital. So there was a big amount of money that flowed into the private capital ecosystem. Can you guess what happens next?
Basically, that word salad means it's the funder's fault. Essentially.
To some extent, this does hold true. That there was so much money that came into the ecosystem. Funds ballooned in size. Folks who used to run a fund of 10 million, their next fund 100 million. Somebody who used to run a 50 million fund is now managing 500 million. Without the teams evolving, without the thought process evolving, without the stage changing in many times. So they said, okay, if I used to run a 50 million seed fund, I now have a $500 million seed fund. And I'm just going to keep spending that money on different companies because I have it. Now, the reality is it's almost impossible to return a $500 million seed fund. It really doesn't happen because you are now reaching a point where you're spraying and praying and you're just doling out capital to everybody who comes. What happens here also is that founders grab that capital and take it. And once they've taken that capital, they start building businesses that probably shouldn't have existed, that probably didn't meet the bar of becoming a real company. But now suddenly, because there's capital available, hey, let's try and make that happen.
Makes sense. But I think, Avik, we should take one step back and really talk about the difference between a layoff, a firing, and letting people go in general. Right? How do you understand this difference?
For me, it basically breaks down to if you're firing someone, it's typically for a cause. That cause could be as crazy as you've violated like ethical rules, or something as not mild, but something as real as you've just not been able to perform. You're not being able to meet your targets. You're not contributing well enough to the organization. So unfortunately, we have to let you go.
Makes sense. I think when I look at it from a founder's perspective, it's a little simpler, if I may say, first principles. Firing in whatever way or form is basically a founder or a hiring manager telling somebody, we or I do not want you in the company anymore.
Fair.
For a reason, without reason, whatever it may be. Layoffs are when it's like, I really like what you're doing. Irrespective of how well you're performing and irrespective of what I want or not, I can't have you in the company anymore. Right? So it almost is like,
it's a forced choice.
yeah, there's a forced choice. There's, if an employee comes and says, is there anything we can do or is there anything we could have done? And it's one of those moments where just like,
could you give me, like, you've been a founder for a while. Could you give me an example?
Let me give you an example of this, right? I think as a founder, you often make bets, right? Sometimes you may bet on your core business, working on certain market tailwinds. You may assume that more and more people will buy what you're selling, will use what you're building. And sometimes it just does not pick up. And you have to axe that entire project as a whole. Now that
So it hurts.
It does. It really does. It's not the easiest decision. But when you do that, no matter how good that team is, unless, of course, you have another project where the team can be absorbed, which is very rare at a startup compared to a larger organization like a Google or a Microsoft, where you may have several tech teams working on several different projects. And
you could absorb them in somewhere else.
Yeah. And I mean, even those larger companies do make layoffs, right? And massive layoffs. But it really comes down to, when you're in that spot of axing a project, everybody related to that may have to go, right? Like, I'll give you a very personal example of this that I faced. I was first building a legal tech startup called Layantra. At some point, because of certain Bar Council of India press releases and other, moves, we realized that we wanted to play it on the side of abundant caution. We did not want to risk falling foul of the law later. Right? Think about what happened with online gaming companies recently.
Yeah.
I did not want to first build out a company and that happened to us. So the press release came about 10, 15 months of us into our journey. And by that time, we had a full-fledged tech team. While some of them were not doing exceptionally well, some of them really were, right? And I still remember on one day when we decided to make the pivot, we just had to let the tech team go. And it was probably the hardest day of my life while building.
Sorry. I mean, it's really hard to go to someone and say, for no fault of your own, you're doing a great job, you're a great person, you don't take this to heart. It's literally it's the equivalent of it's me, not you.
It is basically that, right? But I think it's getting dumped sucks, no matter how it happens, whatever the reasons are, right? It could be a perfect rational reason, like, oh, moving to another place. Doesn't matter.
Yeah, getting dumped sucks.
Yeah, so and I remember one founder told me this, which I'll never forget. They said, anybody who works with you may not remember a day of what working in your office looked like, but they will remember every millisecond of the day they got laid off or fired. Right? Every single word that was spoken, every single action that was taken, and that's so important.
So I think on that note, something that really does come up, and because you mentioned that, is how do you fire? How do you lay off compassionately? Can you?
I think so. This is what worked for me, and this is what I tend to do. I try and be very direct about it. I don't try and, speak for 10 minutes before getting to the point. I tell them, hey, listen, really sorry, we need to talk, but XYZ has happened. As a result, we're axing this project, and the team is being laid off, and that unfortunately includes you. You ensure that there's a sense of finality, right? Because a lot of times, especially when there are good performers. They may be like, hey, listen, we can still make this work. Let's figure out something else.
Let's do something here.
But if you made that decision, I think it's important to just let them know that there is a sense of finality so that they're also mentally not hanging on. Right? You try and give them some buffer room as far as your pockets allow or the company's pockets allow to help them get as soft a landing as possible. Sometimes that's not possible. Sometimes you could do a little bit, right? And ensure that you're not hiding in your cabin or in a conference room on that day.
So something like, as I would call this, this is when I was working. So while I was with Zilingo, I was somewhere in the top leadership, and there was a time when we were in the middle of a massive fundraising round. It was a $226 million, totally ended up being a Series D, sorry. But while we were at it, and I can't share the names, but I can tell you something that happened. We were being due diligenced. The due diligence was being run by one major firm. And there was another firm that was looking to participate in the round. Now it turns out, and we only figured this out later, that the partners at each of the firms hated each other for a very deeply personal reason. Nothing to do with professional. May have been somebody's partners. Anyway. So they had their own problems with each other, which translated into the professional ground where one said, I am not going to share the DD report with the other unless they cough up money. Yes, this does happen. Sometimes you split costs. Sometimes if there's a larger firm doing the DD, they're very comfortable just sharing the DD report ahead. And mostly we try and be collaborative because
of course,
any extra costs typically get borne by the company.
Absolutely.
So we're like, hey, can we reduce those? In this particular case, those folks came back and said, all right, we want to conduct an independent due diligence ourselves, which dragged the round, which should have closed, like let's say in August, to all the way to a January.
Yeah.
Now, when you, as a company, as leaders, when you're planning your business, your runway, we had kept a little bit of a buffer saying, by August our round will close. We had no plans for this round to stretch for another 7 months.
Yeah.
There was no visibility, no thought process. So suddenly we're in this point where, do we stop spending? Do we start firing? Do we lay off? What do we do? That's when we took a couple of hard calls. We froze all non-essential projects. We cut down a lot of non-essential marketing. Certain marketing you just can't do without for a company that size. But any moonshot projects, all of those were shelved for the next year. And then I think about 35, 40 of us, effectively we just went by the highest paid in the company.
Of course.
And about 40 of us came together and said, all right, we are going to just defer taking salaries for a couple of months. Because then we don't have to affect anybody else's payroll. If we just defer taking...
That's a really salutary way about going, that you all went about it. And I wish more people did that.
Yeah, it hurt, but...
I don't think any of this is easy. And I think what a lot of people don't realize is a lot of this is outside the founder's control, right? In an ideal world, and I think I really need to address this, in an ideal world, no founder will do a layoff ever.
Yeah.
Right? They may fire people for whatever cause, without cause, but they would not want to lay off people. In an ideal world, no VC would want to lay off people.
Yeah.
Right? But Avik, what would you say to somebody who is looking to work at a startup and has just been reading a lot of news about layoffs?
So, we were in one of the conversations we had recently with a group of folks. Statistically, working at a startup is one of the riskiest moves you can make in your life. But having effectively built my career around either investing in or working in or building startups, it's incredibly rewarding. But you have to walk in with the notion that this is not a large corporate. This is not a company with 100 processes that has a huge bunch of divisions. If you get hired into a large multi-billion-dollar company, as long as you're performing well, like literally what you said earlier, if you're getting fired, that's a very different issue. But if you're performing well, and there's, let's say, a division that's going to be shut down or a project that's going to be shut down, you typically be absorbed. Hell, people will be fighting over good talent within an
Yeah, of course.
organization to kind of poach, "Hey, I want.
Yeah.
So you have that flexibility. But in a startup, you're entering something you're entering a business that's trying to create a business where there was none. And that's the crux of it. Trying. When you try, there is always an element of failure, and there's a fairly large element of failure. 90% of startups don't make it past that seed to Series A kind of level. It's just death. And then from there, what do you think is the mortality of a Series B startup?
Very low compared to a Series.
I'm talking about a company that's doing about 50 to 100 crores in revenue, has raised billions of dollars.
Far lower than your Series.
It's still close to 50%.
Oh.
Yes.
Oh, wow.
It is still close to 50%. So even when you're entering a company that's fairly well funded, that's fairly well capitalized, that has a certain base of customers, you're still looking at a close to 50% mortality rate.
Wow.
That's the risk level
that
you need to kind of adjust to.
Yeah, but I think this is also why I tell, a lot of people come to me and say, hey, we're considering working at a startup. And I always ask them 2-3 questions. I'm like, one, are you at that point in your life where you can take a career risk, right? If you're single, young, please do it now because you may never get the chance to do it ever again. And you will always have that regret, that what if, right? If you're at that point in life where you can prioritize growth and learning over anything else, please work at a startup because just the kind of hands-on experience you get, parallel, like it's second to none. There's no parallel, right? Yesterday I was at a dinner and somebody had spent 20 years at a big IT firm and they were literally just finding other things to do to make their life meaningful because they're like, work happens, it's the same old, it's been the same old for 6 years. That is not what working at a startup is like, right? But it does come with its risks and layoffs are very much a risk that you have to be aware about when you do join a startup.
I think here it's really important to call out one particular piece as well, which is privilege. And both of us benefit from that. If you come luckily from a household where you don't have to worry about paying rent for your parents, making sure food's on the table for them. If you have a partner and you have a child, your partner's working, there is somebody in the house that can bear the base expenses of the house, or you have that covered already. That already gives you a chance to take so many more risks in your life.
Absolutely, absolutely. And that's what I tell somebody, that if you have student debt that you need to pay off, do anything to first clear that debt and then take risks in your life.
Yes.
Right? Because otherwise what you're doing is you're kind of adding a layer of risk over a layer of risk. It's like stacking up bets.
Yeah.
Right? And in a casino, I mean, make a bet on one bet, like I may have a 50% or a close to 50% chance of winning. But if I stack bets, it becomes 25%, 20%, 5%. Although the payout is larger, not worth it.
Human beings are very bad at math. We are inherently very bad at math. We are very optimistic and we just don't calculate risk in any form or format.
Absolutely. And I think it's very easy to get swept up in excitement right at the start. And that's why I tell anybody looking to join a startup, it is probably the best thing you can do for yourself personally if you can afford it.
Yes.
Right? If you know what your fallback is, if you know, if you're in your 20s and if you don't have student debt, you have nothing to lose, go for it. Please go for it because that's the best time to ever work at a startup.
Yeah. And then of course, Devash, my favorite time to build a startup is once you've been in build your career for about 10 years plus and then get up and say, okay, I've built a name. I am who I am. I know I can fall back into the corporate career again.
That's a whole other conversation, Avik. And all I'm going to say is let's agree to disagree. Right? I'm sure, just on that tangent, I know most successful founders are 40 plus. But that does not mean that we should be investing or supporting only 40 plus founders.
Right. So I think one thing that would be fun to unpack is, and I think you really spend so much time with founders around. What goes through a founder's mind when they have to come to this decision?
So I think one of the characteristic traits of a founder, right, which honestly allows them to just survive with the uncertainty and insanity that is building a startup, is you have to almost always have a delusional level of conviction
Agreed.
in yourself and what you're building. At the same time, obviously reality exists and you look at the data, but there are times when it's 50-50 or 49-51, and those times you tend to err on the side of optimism.
Makes
right?
sense.
Say, for example, I am a founder. I have 6 months of runway left. I am in talks with 3 firms,
Yeah.
3 VC funds, and I'm quite confident that the next round will come before that. Right? I would not lay off unless there is a good business reason to lay off. Right? However, on the flip side, most founders have probably raised 1 or 2 rounds before that.
Yes.
They have not had experience with 30 rounds of funding the way somebody on the other end of the table may have. So they may not know of a tactic such as a VC delaying, the round so that they can squeeze a little bit of valuation.
Squeeze that last valuation.
Yeah, because the VC knows, right? It's like when a founder has 1 month runway left, they know that they can get a better deal, right? And they do that. They do that more often than not.
They do.
Right? Even if, and plus the round may not close. There are times when term sheets have been signed, due diligence has been done. Everything is good to get executed, and
We just caught up with somebody recently, and they had shared where they had a pretty significant term sheet, and then COVID hit, and that the company was an offline based company,
Yeah.
so obviously they were impacted, and the investor, just because term sheets are non-binding, just pulled that term sheet,
Yeah.
and suddenly you've gone from a business with a signed term sheet with 60, 70 employees, optimistic, ready to continue growing, and now you have no money in the bank.
yeah. I know the founder you're talking about very well. One thing that he said was that 85%, so he had a conversation with his team where he said, look, we can't afford to pay you. Our runway is drying out. Feel free to leave, and if you're leaving, we would be happy to make calls and put you anywhere we possibly can, and we'll try our best. But if not, and if you are willing to take a little more of a risk and a massive risk in your life, work with us for a few months without salary, and 85% of the
Wow.
people stayed with him.
That is incredible.
Yeah,
That's
and-
incredible. And even when you look at companies that have laid off, today we're all gearing up for Meesho's IPO, so I'm going to bring that up. It's 32 times, I think, subscribed on the grey market premium. It looks like it's going to be a great IPO. And that's amazing for the startup ecosystem in general, because we need more of these. We need more liquidity events.
Is it great for the startup ecosystem or for the VC ecosystem?
You know what? I think it's inherently entwined. If you want more funding, you need more liquidity. If VCs don't return capital to their investors,
Absolutely.
that cycle is not going to start again.
Very true.
Yeah.
Very true.
So it's symbiotic. So if I looked at Meesho, just frankly, literally before this episode, I was looking it up, and they have laid off close to about 400 people, about I think close to about 18% of their workforce in the last 4 or 5 years, and some of that was in that 22-23 period of uncertainty,
Yeah.
when you could see that their business was going through kind of maybe its last existential change
Yeah.
before they realized how to optimize ideally
Yeah.
for their unit or economics till they realized exactly what they're strong at and
Correct.
could double down.
Yeah.
And I can't imagine that was easy. But when I spent some time on looking at the impacts of that, they provided good severance packages, 2 months at minimum and higher in most cases, depending on people's length of service. They had an external agency to support placements for these people who were being laid off. So, and I've met the founders way early on in their journey, like back in the 17, 18. And they come off, even back then, they came off as considerate people. So when you're taking this kind of decision, you're taking it for the betterment of the entire organization, for the entire company. That it's almost, think of gangrene. Unfortunately, there are times when you have to amputate a part of a body so that the greater whole can survive.
Yeah. And you know, I think this is where a lot of people get it very wrong about layoffs, because a lot of founders and sometimes a lot of VCs think that, look, this is a decision, company can't support it, move out. But what they're not realizing it is how you manage a layoff is oftentimes less about the people you're laying off and more about the people who are staying.
I have to share an example of this,
Yeah.
and this goes back to Zilingo. And
Yeah.
being friends with a lot of the folks on the investor side also who made that decision. I was obviously an employee at the time. I wasn't even consulted about the fact that this was happening. This decision was taken behind like the most closed of closed doors. And next thing I know, some of my team members are calling me saying, "Hey, Avik, we have a one-on-one set up with, like, you know, the CXOs." Like, all right, that sounds a little strange. And then a couple of my team members called me in an hour, let's say after that meeting, and they said, "Avik, there was a lawyer on that call. They forced us to sign an agreement on the spot, otherwise we wouldn't get our severance, and we were told today is your last day."
Wow.
And I have never seen firing that ruthless and that heartless kind of ever done before.
Yeah. But that's the thing, it's about the people who stay. Because unless you're shutting down the company, you are now left with a bunch of people who have lost
All faith.
Yeah, they've lost their faith, they've lost their friends who they used to look forward to coming to work for. Their sense of job security has gone down massively. Their motivation levels may be at an all-time low. And
I mean, just imagine, Divesh, like the next calendar invite you get,
yeah.
you're literally shaking in your boots wondering whether this calendar invite is going to be, "I'm fired tomorrow, I don't have a job."
No, absolutely. And you know, here's the thing. The level of uncertainty that oftentimes employees have in such scenarios is even higher than what a founder or a VC has. Because at the end of the day, in that boardroom, whether the founder is fighting for the employees, whether the VC is pushing back, or whether it's a joint decision, or whether it's the founder who's proposing that this happens as an austerity measure or whatever it may be, that's happening in the boardroom, and both the founder and the funder are privy to that conversation.
Yes.
The employee is not.
The employee is not.
Right? And they will hear rumors. They will hear, those secrets, those whispers down the hallway. They have no idea what's happening.
It's a very scary place to be in. You know what? I think when it comes to behind closed doors, as a funder, and unfortunately, I don't see enough VCs knowing or understanding one important piece, that they are fiduciaries, that we are all fiduciaries. We are responsible for the capital that's been entrusted to us, which also means that we are responsible for something as simple as the morale of that company.
Absolutely.
And more importantly, that longevity. As you mentioned, a founder's job is to be delusional. I feel an investor's job is to counter that delusion with a dose of reality.
Absolutely.
And I've been in a room where I had actually pushed for a certain minor amount of austerity, where it was, "Hey, you know what, my first call actually was," and this is a Series A company, where the founders were paying themselves 86 lakhs a year.
Wow.
This was ridiculous. There was a complete failure in all forms of checks, balances, and any balances from the VC side. I came in and I just looked at this and I was like, okay, this looks irrational and idiotic. Over and above that, the salary burn was insane. It was just nuts. And I just came in here and I said, "Folks, you're running X company of this size, you have 35 engineers, when most companies of your size have 10. You're paying everybody, if not market standards, you're paying a lot of the people in your team more than the market would pay them." I'm like looking at a legal and compliance officer and I'm like, "Hey, you're paying this person 20% more than they'd make at a Big Four. Why?"
May I interject here?
Yes.
Right? Now, I know that, Avik, because we've spoken about this example at greater depth, so I know exactly which company you're talking about. I know that this was when you had just joined a fund.
Yes.
Or that fund which had invested in them. Right?
Yeah.
They were already a portfolio company. My question would be this. Why was nobody from the fund monitoring this before? Why do you let it get to that point and
question.
then pull the plug.
This was a couple of funds
Yeah.
that I'd invested together. So, in fact, I will, since you know the name, I can't share it, but I will share something that I was having one of the biggest fights ever with someone who was a partner of another fund, 10 years my senior by age, 2 years my junior by investing experience. And this wonderful partner kept looking at me and saying, Avik, you can't have these conversations. You're going to ruin the morale of the founders. How are they going to want to work? Why are they going to want to work? And I'm looking at this individual and and I'm like, are you here to help them build a company? Or are you here to pander to them? If you're here to pander to them, I'd suggest you join them, make a kindergarten and play. Or are you here to run a financial company? Are you here to build this out? What do you want to do? Do you know your numbers? Do you know what the market standard for X role is? Do you know what the market standard for Y role? Do you know what the market standard for X particular spend? I can share the spend. It's hosting. Hosting costs are typically supposed to be sub 10-12% of your total revenue. This company's was 30%. And when I dug deep and dug deeper and deeper, it was because the CTO had made some bad decisions. I'm like, maybe you should replace that founder. If you made a bad decision that resulted in 20% higher spends than any other company in this sector, what are you doing?
Yeah. And this is why I feel like sometimes we should not look at things just as compliances, right? The second somebody raises funds, they have so many disclosure obligations. The founder and the company has to disclose so many things to the VC fund month on month, quarter by quarter, annually. Look at them and read them, please. Like, I think I say this on behalf of all founders, that we'd rather know where we're going wrong way before.
Yeah.
Right? Because you would know market standard because you've seen so many podcasts, you have seen so many companies. The founder is building one.
Yeah, fair.
Right? And founders often have a far more zoomed in view of the business. Right? Because they're not doing audits every month of the business. You're thinking about how to grow, which is a whole different thought process. Yes. You're not necessarily looking at what is.
Like, if I could propose something as a market standard.
Yeah.
And I know this hurts because as a founder, you want to stretch that envelope to the last minute, that last second, that just, hey, maybe something can turn around. Maybe I'll close that funding round. Maybe I'll close that new investor or new client or something. But in order to kind of balance this out and to be fair to your team and the people who've backed you and the people who've taken that risk to join you. And again, I'm not saying any of this for a funder. I'm saying this literally from a founder's team, from an employee perspective, is set yourself a cutoff point. And I do this with a lot of my portfolio companies. I actually work this out, which is what is a point where you're going to draw the line and say, I have enough money to give a 2-month severance left for my employees. This is when I should decide to shut shop. So that I can at least make sure that my employees leave with 2 months of pay.
I agree with that, Avik, but at the same time, I'm going to give you a counter perspective here. What happens when a founder is relying on a promise by somebody to put in money in their company, which that person just delays? Like literally, as you said, right? Because of ego clashes between two VC partners.
Yeah.
What do you do in that scenario? Because
it's a massive struggle.
Yeah, because you're not looking to lay off people.
Yeah.
You're not looking to cut off that project. Right? And it just happens. So, and I want to say this, right? Founders bear the brunt of all of this optics.
All of it. Unfortunately,
all
VCs look like getaway smelling, rosy clean. Sad.
Yeah.
It is sad.
And I'll tell you, this is, I think, one of the hallmarks of the best founders I've seen, right? Now, the founder we often make bets,
yes,
right? The Shopify founders, I'd love to talk about this. When the Shopify founders were doing a layoff, they said, listen, guys, really sorry. We take full responsibility. The founders take full responsibility. One of our bets did not work. And this is a result of that bet not working out. They did not say, oh, the market shifted or there was a market shift which we did not predict, which actually was the case.
Yes.
They did not say, oh, we were told to do this. buyer investors. They were not told they did not blame anybody else.
They took accountability.
Yeah.
How did they do the layoffs?
I mean, it was honestly, I think, just the clear communication that, hey guys, we took a wrong bet. This is how it is. And you know, what I've also realized is sometimes the mode in which it happens is not as important, and it's also very cultural. Right? For example, in India or Asia, for that matter, a one-on-one with every single employee is probably not the way to go.
Okay.
Right? Because what happens when you have that first meeting and there are 30 scheduled after?
It'll hurt.
Right? You're basically, now you're telling people that, listen, the axe is there. The only thing is, the axe is scheduled for you at 5 p.m.
You'd rather it just all fall at once.
Just tell them. And then keep yourself open to talk to everybody, help them one-on-one after.
In the experiences that you've seen, because you're obviously spending a lot more time day to day with founders who'll share stuff that they won't share with me.
Yeah.
How do you find their team members being received back into the job market?
Oh, I think this is where we have to keep Indian cultural context in mind, right? And business cultural context. Now, India is a country where some of your best businesses and your most successful businesses, your legacy businesses, they've hired based on current revenue, not future projected revenue, right? Obviously, that is the traditional way of building a business. And with this startup ecosystem, because we're being riskier, trying to create more value far more quickly, we're not waiting 3 generations for it, there is your onboarding more risk,
yes,
right? Now, the problem is, as a legacy person in a traditional business, if you've been laid off or you've been fired, there is almost zero difference. There's a similar taboo which applies to you.
So layoffs have a taboo.
Absolutely, because not enough people understand the difference between a layoff and a firing.
Yeah, because I've looked around and I've seen that so many traditional companies are absolutely unwilling to look at CVs of amazing people who have been laid off.
Yeah, because in their heads, they've been fired. And if they've been fired, and they're not telling us why they've been fired, what has happened. So
it goes back to the low trust that we've discussed before.
Absolutely. But it's also so cultural, right? Because, even in the US, although you have traditional businesses which, hire based on current revenue and not hire for projected revenue, they don't hire based on funding that is coming into the company. The difference is that they had started doing this decades before India. So this generation of employers is far more normalized.
That a layoff happens.
That layoffs and fires are completely different.
In fact, when I see the layoffs happening in the US, very quickly when the US layoffs started, there were sites being created literally by ex-Google folks, by ex-Microsoft folks, and they were job banks. They were basically saying, hey, these are amazing people, this is their CVs, this is their profiles. And they were founders of startups as well as large tech company HR folks who are going like, hey, please send these lists to us.
Yeah.
We would love to consider these people.
Absolutely.
And I want that culture to be built in India. I think that is kind of the next leap that we need.
Sounds like a startup idea. Avik, one of the things I really wanted, I think I speak for a lot of founders that, yes, part of being a founder is, we will put our name to the fact that we're laying off. And there is a lot of expectation on founders to try and, help every single employee laid off. While most founders in principle would want that, also the time when a layoff is happening is probably not the best time for the founder or the
struggling
company.
to manage to keep the business alive and afloat.
Exactly. Why don't VCs help out?
You really hit kind of a sensitive point, and I think that so much more can be done from a VC perspective. Yes, you are struggling to make sure that your portfolio stays alive, but at the end of the day, that's not your entire struggle, because
Absolutely.
that's the founders and the team that's
Yeah.
running the company kind of working on that. I think that this is something that US VC does very well, where they come together, they actually create these lists, the same way companies do. They create these lists, they go out there for the entire team. Indian VC will typically do this maybe for the founders or 1 or 2 C-level folks who you're close to, but we don't institutionalize this.
Yeah,
And do it.
that's more like a personal obligation as opposed to, oh, it's our responsibility okay, and even looking at it from a pure business standpoint, right? I'm not even saying moral, I'm not even saying ethical. Fuck all of that. I'm saying from a business standpoint, if a company is laying off people, the best talent in that company, could that be used for other podcasts?
Absolutely. Figure out who those people are, understand their journey, and immediately try and make sure that they're connected to other portfolio
And I
founders.
see so many short-term and long-term benefits, right? Short-term benefits is you retain good talent.
Yes.
Long-term benefits is if enough funders do this, if enough institutional funders do this, suddenly job security at a startup is not that much to be worried about.
Yeah. Because, I mean, one thing that we always do as VCs is we try and attract talent to the company.
Exactly.
We try. A lot of folks don't do it, but
Yeah.
some of us do. And when we're bringing in talent, you're almost saying, hey, we want you to take this incredible risk.
Yeah.
Now, if you can say that, hey, if you take this risk and it doesn't pan out, we can support you through that journey, that changes the entire kind of conversation.
Absolutely.
So, one thing, and I keep going back to this man because I kind of revere him. This is when COVID started. And companies all around the world were panicked. People were paralyzed with fear about what was going to happen. And this is also a masterclass in transition. So, in 2019, Ajay Banga had, I love him, really love him, had said that he's going to be leaving Mastercard and announced his successor. Now, obviously, it's a long transition. Typically, these are 6 to 12 month transition plans. So, in March of 2020, when all of this was happening, and he shared a little bit of the behind the scenes. So, obviously, they were discussing this in January and February at a board level for Mastercard. And the board, the first reaction from the board is obviously panic. So here you can use the board as your funder equivalent.
Yeah.
The board's reaction was panic. They're like, in this kind of a situation, you don't change the captain of a ship.
Absolutely.
So everybody was pushing him to stay. They were like, no, defer the change, defer the transition. And his pushback was, no, because if I defer this transition, hey, I'm going to defer it now. The world goes through ups and downs. Business goes through ups and downs. If this new CEO, the incoming CEO, doesn't face this, then how are they going to be respected? Every time people are going to think, okay, there's a problem, you're going to call the old CEO back. But what he did was, he said, I'm going to be standing by, literally a seat on the side. I am the advisor. I will be there supporting. And then this is where I know you love talking about social capital.
Yeah.
I think that there's a lot that comes in these kind of scenarios and situations where the business is not going to go well or there's a global screw up.
Yeah.
Where you have to, as a founder or as a CEO, you have to leverage your political capital with your board.
Yeah.
So what Ajay did here, and he got the sign off from the board, and then in March 2020, it was the new CEO supported by Ajay who were in the Mastercard office recording a message, a live all hands. And of course, everybody joined because you're really scared. And they said, nobody is being laid off because of COVID. Performance-based firings will obviously continue, but we are guaranteeing that we are not going to make a layoff because of business conditions.
Yeah.
And if you look at the Indian startup market, I think that there are a lot of companies that have done this phenomenally well.
Yeah.
A top of the mind example is a Razorpay.
Oh, phenomenal.
I have never seen a large layoff coming out of Razorpay. It's just not happened, and I think we've spoken to enough people we know from there that...
Yeah, and the beauty of it is, then they've not started building post the COVID era.
Yeah. They've survived it. They're pre-COVID company.
This is through a lot of transitions, space which is very highly regulated. And I think there were times when they had to stop onboarding.
Yes.
Right, which is as big a hit as it gets. It's, I think, equivalent to, India banning online gaming companies all of a sudden.
You've really kind of brought up a painful point, I think,
Yeah.
that you're doing everything theoretically right, and then suddenly there's a sweeping regulatory change, and all of a sudden you can't run X business anymore.
Yeah.
Which means the thousands of people working for X business no longer have a purpose, because you can't afford, I mean, as much as every founder would love to, you can't pay a few thousand salaries saying that, hey, you're not doing, there's no contribution to a business, because that doesn't exist anymore.
Absolutely. You know, Avik, one of the things you spoke about, probably on a little tangent, but very crucial to layoffs, but I don't think too many people talk about this, is what happens between the funders, the founders, and the board. And how does that play out? And I know you've probably been part of a lot many more of these discussions than I have. I'd love for you to talk about what that boardroom is like.
It is one of the most uncomfortable places to be. Nobody wants to be in that room. You're in that room because you have to be in that room to have the hard conversations that need to be had. Because, I mean, let's put it this way, we can't ostrich, we can't just bury our heads under the sand and say everything is fine. So when you're in that room, when you're sitting in, especially when you're, as a funder, we are not as close to the people as a founder is. There's just too much distance. We don't know these people as individuals, as human beings. So when we're pulling this up, and I've had to do this, when you're pulling this up and you're literally turning people into an Excel sheet and a number, and then you're working with the founders to effectively almost get them to justify why you're keeping this person. The serious answer is it sucks. It's not fun.
And I'm sure, because I mean, I speak to founders day in, day out, especially for their core team and people who are, say, up to 2 levels below them, they will fight.
So something that's really important to kind of understand here, and we just touched upon kind of political capital that you build. It's almost you earn more political capital or goodwill with your board.
And you can't fight them on everything.
Yes, you can't. So you earn it with a couple of things. So I think one point that I'd just like to bring up here is a lot of founders treat their investors and their board like folks you mandatorily have to report to once a quarter. You have to send them some details here and there. But that's about it. It's a very transactional relationship. Hey, now I'm going to call you for the next funding round. Now, if you do that, you are making this relationship entirely transactional. Which means that as an investor also, I am going to view this as an entirely transactional relationship. Where when these hard times come, when these fights come, it's unfortunately human nature. Where if I have a beyond transactional relationship with you, it's going to change the way things play out.
Very true. In fact, I think, to build that social capital, if nothing else, the analysts, the associates of the VC fund should spend some time in the office.
Completely agree. But when it comes to building that social capital, there's another very important aspect to it, because at the end of the day, this is a business relationship.
Absolutely.
It is performative.
Of course.
So if you have a founder who makes, 10 crazy bets every few years, and 8 or 9 of them pan out, work, or really turn into something cool, you are much more likely to support any idea that founder has. Whether that founder says, hey, you know what, let me kind of put these people on a 1 month, 2 month hiatus or probation, or reduce let the entire company take a 70% pay cut, and let me not fire these people and try and stabilize the business. You'd be way more willing to support that than a founder who gets one right out of every 10 bets.
There's this one, I'm going to go back to my legal days here, because when I was reading about this one country, I could not believe what I was reading. So there is one country in the world, one that I know of, I'm sure there may be more, which has actually 2 board of directors, right? One board will be your shareholder board.
A country or a company?
A country mandates, as per their company law, that every company has to have 2 boards of directors.
Okay.
One of them will be your shareholder board, which is what we have in India, the US, etc. The other will be comprised of other stakeholders, including employees, including some representatives of the top customers, top vendors.
Incredible.
And other people from society who are affected by the decisions.
Because all of these decisions have such...
Do you know which country this is?
No.
It's Germany.
Wow.
At some way, what if we get, what if we move from that strictly shareholder perspective to a stakeholder perspective?
And it is a stakeholder perspective
It
because
is.
your customers are going to be affected, your vendors are going to be affected. Hell, if you're large enough, the landlords in a city will be affected.
Absolutely.
The food vendors,
Absolutely.
people who literally, hey, when you have a big office, there are like 5 tupperies that are set up down to cater, who've come because your staff exists. And suddenly, if you disappear, those people may not have like customers anymore.
Yeah. Do you know the only time in India when all the stakeholders get a say?
When?
Insolvency.
Really?
Yeah. They all can put forth their claims to the RP. They all can come before the NCLT at that point. But before that, it's like...
But it's almost kind of, you're saying that, hey, you need to let the disease get terminal before you actually
Exactly.
bring anybody in.
And I think if we can try and change that, right, like open communication, try and get people to talk about this more, think about this more, let them in on the discussions, have one representative of the employees there on the board. It will really change the way layoffs are handled, right? Because there are times you will have to lay off. There is no doubt about that, right? I think Google does, in a good year, they do 20, 25 different projects. They have closed down over 290 different apps, Google Plus, Google Glass. Okay, and this is one of the largest tech companies, but that's how they stay afloat.
Yes.
Right? You have to constantly be innovating, especially in the tech world. Things change much faster than they used to. Right? If I'm a traditional steel business, one innovation may result in a better process, but the business remains the same.
And that's what you see in companies and founders who have matured over time.
Yeah.
So, I can share one example. Literally, it's the most first world problem in the world.
Yeah.
But I was so sad when it shut down. But because obviously I have some friends across the ecosystem, I went in and dug deep into the unit economics and realized why they shut it down.
Yeah.
Zomato legends. Suddenly you can get the best Hyderabadi food delivered to your plate tomorrow in Bombay.
Yeah.
And get a single portion. And I went a little crazy. I think I was basically just eating like food from around the country for a while.
Yeah.
But they really tried. First it was like, a simple basic minimum order of like $300 or $400.
Yeah.
Then they tried to make this into a party order or like, a large order for 5,000 rupees.
Yeah.
And at every stage they really tried. And they weren't able to make the unit economics work. And that's when you just take a hard call and say, hey, okay, we can't make it work. Exit.
Yeah. And I don't think that's just a startup problem. I think that's just the way the world is moving towards, with constant innovation being the name of the game.
Yeah.
Right? On that note, Avik, would you like to just encapsulate some of the takeaways from this discussion?
I think the major ones for me, and one thing that I really, really, really want to push, two things, is number one, as VCs, as funders, what more can we do? Can we step in and make these processes a little more humane? Can we take away from the fact that, these are just numbers on Excel for us, and can we humanize it?
Yeah.
Can we help them find soft landings? Can we actually spread this talent across our portfolios?
Yeah.
And the second one I really, really want, and I want to send this message out to founders there, that can we normalize having a strike-off date?
That, I was going to say, would be one of my biggest takeaways as well. That strike-off date is massive.
Yeah, because just think about it. Do you have enough money in the bank at this point if you shut down to pay off? And I think one thing we missed, but I really want to capture it, is to pay off your employees' statutory obligations.
Yeah.
The first
Absolutely.
thing, unfortunately, I see when companies are going down is, oh my God, this person's provident fund wasn't paid.
Yeah.
The tax deducted at source wasn't paid for a vendor.
Yeah.
And these have cascading effects that hurt
Absolutely.
people.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And those compliances not being done is
Bad.
it's bad. It's very, very bad.
Yeah.
For everybody involved.
Yeah. So can we have a strike-off date where you say, can you meet all the obligations that you have? That is kind of the day you know your company is kaput.
Very true. Well, thanks, Avik. This was a great discussion. For all of those of you out there, we wanted to really thank our writers' room. So we've gotten some founders, some people from the VC ecosystem, and some people who are just generally interested in the startup ecosystem, or either founders or funders, and formed a writers' room. If you'd like to be part of the writers' room, do look at the link in the bio and apply. We'd love to have you, and potentially you can come and brainstorm on the next episodes with Avik and I. And yeah, thanks for watching. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe.
Awesome.